ever-evolving medical landscape in which practitioners are working, I think that there's a concern as well that as more and more procedures that were perhaps one time carried out in the hospital where all medical practitioners are insured becomes more common in the community or private sector setting, that medical insurance is all the more important. And indeed, the type of medical or indemnity products, we'll call them, I don't know, are they standardised, Minister? Do you go to a company and say, I'm looking for general medical cover, or is there particular ones? Is there varieties of it? Is there a gold standard? Is there types of ones that you can have? And we'll say that might give you third-party fire and theft or full comprehensive, you know, if you understand the point that I'm trying to make. And in the absence of a legal framework in which it is required for medical practitioners to do so, is there a concern that the providers of indemnity products or insurance products might be a little bit behind the curve in developing insurance? I think sometimes there might be, with the evolution of medical practices, there might be a blurring of the lines between what maybe perhaps, for example, were considered at one time invasive procedures and perhaps non-invasive procedures. And as medicine evolves in the community and in the private practice, these distinctions are becoming more and more and forever more blurred. Do the providers of medical indemnity insurance, Minister, keep themselves fully, or as fully as we'd like them to be, up to speed on the development of their products? That's one thing that I'd like to see. It's in supporting Senator Burke's proposal to ensure that medical insurance is obligatory. I think that by making it obligatory, it provides a relentless focus on the need for indemnity to keep pace with the procedure and the ever-evolving and multi-complex procedures that we're having. So I'm going to stop. My voice is actually gone at this stage, but we are supporting Senator Burke's proposal, and perhaps finally, Minister, if I could just put to you, do you, from experience or professional experience, know of any case in the past where a case was taken against a practitioner who didn't have insurance, and if such a case existed, what was the outcome of it? You'll excuse me if I finish early, Chair.
Thank you, Senator Gilroy. Next speaker is Senator John Crown. You have 6 minutes, Senator.
I don't believe I will need anything like 6 minutes, but I just wanted to make a few points. I'll be very supportive of this. There was a sort of a resonance about this with some of the issues which arose in the context of the abortion debate, where we're legislating for a contingency which we all believe, thankfully, is extremely rare, but it doesn't mean that the necessity for the legislation is invalid. It is our obligation to make sure that bases are covered. In the same way that it's our obligation to make sure that we have appropriate guidelines for the rare situations where a woman's life in a pregnancy may be compromised. We also need to make provision for the extremely rare circumstance of people not practicing medicine with appropriate insurance. I'd like to compliment Senator Burke for having the initiative to bring this bill forward. I know he has been actually an extremely well-informed commentator on issues relating to healthcare, and a very thoughtful one. And I believe he certainly has brought a great degree of wisdom to various health debates in this House over the 2 years that we've been here. Minister, you may be aware that there's a thing called the tombstone imperative, which is a phraseology which is used in air safety circles. And it refers to the way of ensuring air safety by looking back over disasters, and when something very bad happens, learning from the mistake and trying to prevent it from happening in the future. And it's all based on things like black box technology and flight recorders and teams of investigators descending in those very dramatic scenes that we see. And over the years, and this has not been a characteristic of tenure as Minister, but over the years, over the last decade or so that I've been very involved in looking at aspects of the Irish Health Service, it has seemed to me that a version of the tombstone imperative has in fact been in operation here. We've had, in some sense, if I may borrow a phrase, the politics of the last healthcare atrocity has been used in so many circumstances to advance the agenda of healthcare reform. When we had problems with breast cancer care in certain areas, it led to reform of the health service. When we had problems with diagnostics in some other areas, it led to some other improvements. Similarly, we have to understand something, and my colleagues have alluded to the fact that Ireland appears to be heading towards the US in terms of our attitude to medical litigation. We are, if I'm not much mistaken, the second highest in the world after the US for medical litigation. We were for many years third highest after New Zealand, which had a quirkily high place in that pecking order, but we are now highest. And there are certain similarities between our system and that of New Zealand, which I think are quite relevant in this regard. The principal thing, I teach a course on legal aspects of medicine, or medical aspects of medical legal care. I teach teach the regular recurring lecture in the course, rather I should say, on legal aspects of cancer care, and there's no doubt that it's incredibly important. In the US right now, the single biggest disease which leads to doctors being sued is breast cancer, because of misdiagnosis, failure to refer for mammograms appropriately, inappropriate treatment, and a failure to get proper multidisciplinary care. And there is no doubt that in this country we have a major problem, and it does relate to cancer and it relates to other areas. For this reason, I've found myself studying the famous book that the Medical Protection Society puts out every year. It's this annual reminder of the horrors that befall us, in which they go through various cases that occurred on their case books over the previous year, various mistakes which were made. And I would really recommend it to anybody who wants to get some sort of a sense of how things can go wrong in medicine. But there is one recurring theme in Ireland: inappropriate decisions made by non-consultant doctors and by trainees. And that is the core reason why we have so much medical litigation in this country. It's because we have such an abnormally small number of career-level, legally responsible doctors at both general practice level and in the hospital specialties. Overall, we have a relatively average number of doctors because we have a bizarre demographic where so many of them are involved in various training jobs where they are, in fact, are asked to make responsible decisions. I will be supportive of the bill. I will likely also have some comments to make in terms of amendments at committee stage. I would ask you to look at the issue of the tailback insurance for people that are past retirement age, to make sure that the wording of that section is that it does not impose an extra burden on people who at the time of retirement may not have much income. And please remember that there are specialties in this country where the annual premium was higher than the public salary. That has to be remembered. So we have to be careful that we're not leaving any kind of a time bomb ticking for people who may have retired and thought that that burden had been lifted. There has to be a means of ensuring that the provision that they have responsibly made during their careers for insurance coverage gives them adequate coverage afterwards, and that they're not asked to undertake premia which simply are not sustainable for people who are at pension level. I would also just like to say that, in conclusion, good bill will plug a gap, but people do need to remember that in general it's rare as it is, because nearly every job that people apply for requires them to actually have provision of insurance. There are very, very few circumstances in which a medical practitioner can seek employment without actually having insurance. But it is theoretically possible, and it certainly is possible in the case of people who practice on the fringes of medicine, who may have a medical degree, but who are practicing non-conventional medicine, who set themselves up as such. I think it's critically important that this bill plugs all of those gaps, and I commend you and look forward to further debate on it in the sessions to come.
Thank you, Senator Crown. To enable Minister Riley keep a commitment later, if it's okay with the other speakers, I'll call him next, and then we'll call the speakers after that. Minister Riley.
Thank you very much, Cathaoirleach, and I am very happy to be here again and to have the opportunity to participate in this second stage debate on Senator Burke's bill, which proposes the introduction of mandatory professional indemnity cover for medical practitioners engaged in medical practice. And it proposes to do this by amending the Medical Practitioners Act 2007. I want to thank Senator Burke for bringing this matter forward and for acknowledging the fact that this was a bill I tried to progress myself while in opposition. But I also want to acknowledge the great work done by Senator Burke in bringing it to the House here today. In relation to Senator Mooney's comments, I'm afraid you'd have to ask the previous government as to why they never got to heads of bill. I'm not privy to that information. But I can assure him of this: I certainly pursued it at every opportunity I could. Since that time, of course, we've had major events in this country that has shaken it to its foundation in relation to our reliance on borrowed money to run this country through the Troika. And a lot of legislation across all departments has arisen as a consequence of those arrangements. And it makes it very difficult to get bills such as this into the queue. And I'm very grateful for Senator Burke's attention to this and putting it on the floor here today and progressing it by so doing. Many members of the House may also be aware that the matter of mandatory indemnity is a very necessary one in my estimation. And I'd like to point out that the thought process behind this initially was not to be playing catch-up, as indeed Senator Crown has just alluded to, but rather be preemptive. You can't register unless you're insured. Not allowing what we have currently, people to register and then proof of insurance may follow later after the event. And another very important area that we need to address, which is the area of appropriate insurance, which Senator Gilroy alluded to, and that is we have had situations where people have been over here practicing cosmetic surgery who are insured, but they're insured for GP work, not for cosmetic surgery. And in answer directly to your question, I am aware of situations in the past where people were not insured, took a chance, and I'm also aware of the fact that people have suffered as a consequence where malpractice was proven but the individual wasn't insured and there was nothing available, no recourse for the patient. Professor Crown makes a number of assertions around the number of doctors and NCHDs, etc., etc. And I would certainly like to deal with that, but perhaps another day, because today is about this bill. But other than to say just this, there would be a contention that we need double the number of GPs, for instance, in this country that we have at the moment. And yet I put it to you that if we have advanced nurse practitioners working in practice, managing chronic illness care, screening patients to see if they need to see the GP or not, I wonder just how many more GPs we would need. Similarly, a lot of the work that NCHDs are doing at night, being called out of bed to put up an intravenous line when an advanced nurse practitioner could be doing that, or a catheterization when a nurse can be trained to do that. There's an awful lot of work that's currently been done by professionals that could easily be done by other professionals, freeing them up to do the work that they and they alone can do. And I mean, that's the underlying principle in when I talk about treating the patient at the lowest level of complexity that's safe, timely, efficient, and as near to home as possible. Or putting it another way, the right patient being treated by the right person at the right time and the right place. But anyway, coming back to the bill, because there's many similarities in both the bills, I have discussed both of them with the Attorney General, that is this bill here and the ones that the Department have, and who in drafting the other bill will take account of Senator Burke's bill. The Government's bill will be prioritised. My aim is that it will be published before the summer recess, and I hope Senator Burke will agree to this proposal whereby the Government's bill will, where appropriate, adopt the provisions contained in his bill. In this way, we will get maximum benefit from the input of our respective legislative experts on this important matter. I strongly believe there should be a legislative basis for the introduction of mandatory medical indemnity for medical practitioners engaged in medical practice, as other senators, Senator Noon and others have already pointed out. My officials have engaged in an extensive consultation with the relevant stakeholders, and I'm conscious that Senator Burke has also consulted widely on this legislation. Of course, consultation with all parties will continue as the bill progresses. My officials have also taken into consideration the Finlay-Scott report, an independent review of the requirements to have insurance or indemnity as a condition of registration as a healthcare professional. This work was commissioned, as has been said, by the UK Department of Health in 2010, and the report set out a number of key principles in support of its recommendation. They include the need to place a statutory duty upon registrants to have insurance or indemnity in respect of liabilities which may be incurred in carrying out work as a registered healthcare professional. Specifically, the report indicated that a statutory condition of registration should require the registrant to prove a positive, namely the presence of cover, rather than the regulator to prove a negative, namely the absence of a cover. And the outcomes of these considerations in the report's recommendations are being reflected in the bill. I agree with the overall objective of Senator Burke's bill, and we are in agreement that mandatory professional indemnity cover for certain medical practitioners should be produced and introduced. However, there are a number of important areas where I have reservations on the approach being taken in it, and I will give the House a few examples as to why we have these reservations. Section 5 of Senator Burke's bill proposes to introduce a new subsection 2C in the 2007 Act. This proposed subsection requires the Medical Council to make rules specifying the indemnity providers which are recognised by it for the purpose of providing professional indemnity cover to medical practitioners. Such a task will be beyond the Council's current range of knowledge or competencies and may raise competition issues. Section 6 of the Senator's bill requires the Medical Council to establish a committee to be known as the Professional Indemnity Committee to perform certain functions set out in the proposed sections 2A to 2G of Section 11.1. I believe that the establishment and operation of such a committee may cause serious practical difficulties for the Council and may have a disruptive effect on the registration process as established under Part 6 of the Principal Act. Section 8 of Senator Burke's bill proposes to insert a new Section 44A into the 2007 Act. This new section requires the insurer or indemnity provider to notify in writing both the medical practitioner and the Council when it becomes aware that cover has lapsed or has been cancelled. This provision will have significant practical difficulties for indemnifiers. There may also be confidential issues concerning insurers providing the required information to the Medical Council, but I do want to assure the Senator that I actually agree in principle with this, and we will try and overcome these difficulties. I think we need as many cross-references and safety and safeguards as possible to protect patients. My department's bill has been drafted by the Attorney General's Office in consultation with the relevant stakeholders, including the Medical Council, the State Claims Agency and representatives of indemnity providers, and will have regard to the issues raised by all parties. In the bill, if the petitioner does not have indemnity, the Medical Council will have the power to refuse registration. The Council will also have the power to remove a practitioner from the register where indemnity is not maintained. The continued maintenance of indemnity cover will be confirmed by the practitioner by declaration at the time of his or her annual retention of registration. It will be the responsibility of each medical practitioner to establish that they have the required professional indemnity. In this legislation, the role of the Council will be supported by powers, not duties, to require the relevant information from registrants for the purpose of registration and re-registration. The Medical Council does not have the required expertise in the insurance or brokerage market to determine the appropriate level of cover for a medical practitioner, having regard to the type of work or speciality in which he or she is engaged. Accordingly, the legislation will provide for the State Claims Agency to assist the Council in making available guidelines, setting out indicative or minimum levels of cover, having regard to speciality and procedures. And I think this is an important aspect that has to be covered. Overall, my department is approaching the draft legislation at a higher and enabling level. The Medical Council can subsequently specify the necessary detail by the provision of guidance and our rules in accordance with the statutory powers given to the Council in its establishing legislation. I wish to assure the Senator that most of the sections of his bill will be reflected to some extent in the final text of the published bill. In addition to the introduction of mandatory medical indemnity cover, I believe that systems must also be in place to minimise the needs for patients to initiate civil litigation. And indeed, at this point, one might also consider talking to the Medical Council about insisting that the current medical indemnity certificate is displayed in a public place where the practitioner operates. Obviously, this would cause difficulty for people who operate at several premises, but where there's a single premises, it certainly should be the case. The Medical Practitioners Act 2007 introduced a more proactive system of robust registration and regulation of the medical profession. This Act, which we will be amending, has already strengthened areas such as governance, mandatory registration, fitness to practice procedures, education and training, and maintenance of professional competence. The enactment of the bill should help instil further patient confidence in our health system and help underpin other initiatives which are already delivering good outcomes for patients. For example, the HSE National Clinical Care Programmes provide a national strategic and coordinated approach to a wide range of clinical service. They have three main objectives: to improve the quality of care, to improve access and to improve cost effectiveness. The primary aim of the clinical programmes is to modernise the way hospital services are provided across a wide range of clinical areas. This has been done through standardising access to and delivery of high-quality, safe and efficient hospital services and maximising linkages to primary care and other services. There are around 30 clinical care programmes and programme initiatives in different stages of development and implementation. Many of the programmes have produced models of care and guidelines and are developing both integrated and primary care solutions. There are many specific examples of the tangible outcomes of the programmes for patients. But one in particular I think worth mentioning, or two, is the new stroke programme, which has resulted, since its initiation, in saving one life a week in this country, and indeed in avoiding the necessity for long-term care for 3 more of our citizens every single week. We also have an excellent heart failure programme, and both of these were mentioned by Don Berwick in a keynote address in Oregon, who's one of Barack Obama's health spokespeople, as exemplars for what can be achieved in an economy challenged as ours is by a reducing budget. But on top of that, we've had more than 120,000 bed days saved by the implementation of the acute medicine programme, which aims to save 500,000 bed days over 3 years. Yesterday I launched the first national clinical guideline, the National Early Warning Score for Ireland. The launch was the accumulation of the good work of a number of patient safety initiatives, including the National Clinical Effectiveness Framework and the Clinical Care Programme to the HSE. This National Early Warning Score clearly sets out how to recognise and respond to patients whose condition is deteriorating. Recognising patients whose condition is deteriorating and responding to their needs is an appropriate and timely way, are essential components of safe and high quality care. This guideline is based on international evidence of what is known to work best, and Ireland is the first known country to agree a national early warning score. So whether you're a nurse in Tralee, or a doctor in Tala, or a nurse in Letterkenny, you will be aware of the same standards that you will have in front of you that will allow you to assess whether a patient is deteriorating or not and what action needs to be taken. And I believe, having launched that yesterday, it's since come to my notice that we've been nominated for a European award for this. So I want to congratulate all involved in that, and I have no doubt that it will save many lives into the future. Furthermore, one of the leaders told me yesterday that it was introduced in one of our major hospitals, and since that time the incidence of myocardial infarction and heart attack has dropped by 29%. And that hospital is Beaumont. So these are very welcome developments, and they enable us to maximise the benefits for patients from the resources in our healthcare system, but crucially they also underpin the continuing focus on quality of care, which is my primary concern. While I hear and have the opportunity, I would like to talk about the significant improvements that have been achieved in the waiting times for unscheduled emergency care against the background of both reduced funding and staffing levels. It's a very challenging socio-economic climate, and a growing number of older persons with an overall increase in life expectancy are now attending our hospitals, and this is a welcome development, that we have our citizens living longer lives, and we want those lives to be healthier lives too. But just to give a few statistics, we've had a reduction of 23.6% in the number of patients waiting on trolleys in 2012 compared to 2011. This equates to 20,352 fewer patients waiting on trolleys. The 9-month access target for adults, excluding endoscopy, having to wait more than 9 months for an inpatient or day case surgery, was down to 86 at the end of 2012 from 3,706 in December 2011, which is a 98% decrease. And the target for 2013 is a maximum wait time guarantee of 8 months. In relation to the number of children excluding endoscopy waiting over 20 weeks, this was down to a figure of 89 at the end of December 2012 from 1,759 in December 2011, which is a 95% decrease. The number of patients waiting over 13 weeks for a routine GI gastroscopy procedure went down from 4,590 in December 2011 to 36 at the end of December 2012, representing a 99% decrease. And we're trying to ensure that by 30th of November 2013, no patient should be waiting more than 52 weeks for a first-time consultant-led outpatient appointment. At this early stage of 2013, figures are generally remaining approximately 10% below those for the same period in 2012. So, despite the challenges that we face, both financially and in terms of staffing levels, the health service has responded and shown that it can change by empowering the front line to do the things the way they want them done and not having a system strangle them as it did in the past. And so to those who've worked in our health service, I want to say on my behalf and on behalf of the government, and I'm sure on behalf of this House, a heartfelt thank you. Can I just say that my mission is to improve the health and well-being of people in Ireland in a manner that promotes better health for everyone, fair access, responsive and appropriate care, and high performance. The main purpose of the Medical Practitioners Act 2007 was to shift to a proactive system of robust registration and regulation of the medical profession in order to minimise the risk of adverse clinical events. The Medical Council is doing a very good job in providing an efficient and accountable system for the regulation of the medical profession. The public can be satisfied that registered medical practitioners are both appropriately qualified and competent to practice in a safe manner. And my predecessor, Éireann, as mentioned earlier, did change the structure of the Council so that the majority of members are not medical practitioners, which does help instill public confidence that medical practitioners do not have majority control in the governance of their regulatory body. So, Senators, when this bill is enacted, the additional requirement of having adequate indemnity on registration and again on retention of registration will further assure patients and their families that the system in which medical practice is undertaken is operating in a person-centred, effective and fair fashion and a manner which is focused on protecting them from the inevitable times when things do go wrong. It is not a perfect science, it is not a perfect world, but what we can ensure to do is ensure that if something does go wrong, that the harm and hurt to the patient is minimised through having adequate compensation and measures in place to support them to lead the fullest of possible lives afterwards. I am pleased to have had the opportunity to address the House today. I would once again like to acknowledge the work Senator Burke and his team have put into drafting this bill. I would like to support Senator Burke's bill, and I will now arrange for the content of his bill to be used in finalising the text of the government's bill. And I look forward to working closely with Senator Burke as the bill progresses through the Oireachtas to the benefit of all our citizens.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed, Minister Riley. I now call our next speaker, who is Senator Marie Maloney.
I welcome the Minister to the Chamber, and I also would like to thank Senator Burke for bringing this bill forward. And I know from speaking to Senator Burke that he's put an amount of work into this bill. I just find it incredible in today's climate and the number of malpractice cases that all medical practitioners don't have adequate insurance cover. And I think that any medical practitioner who is operating without adequate insurance is playing Russian roulette with their career. And we must also bear in mind the safety and well-being of the patient, and they must be protected, must be safe in the knowledge that if anything goes wrong, there will be a financial backup there to insurance to meet their medical needs. Minister, you spoke about putting the professional indemnity insurance sector up on the wall or on display to the general public, but really you still don't know what coverage they have, whether they have adequate coverage to carry out the procedures they're doing. I'm sure every GP, our medical practitioner, will have a certificate, but whether it's adequate or not, the general public wouldn't really know. So I don't know if it's if it will work just putting the cert up on the wall. And you also spoke about the HSE moving to speed up things and to carry out procedures. While in Kerry General Hospital, the HSE seem to be going the opposite way because they have withdrawn the services of the ultrasounds from the GPs. So GPs can no longer access ultrasounds in Kerry General Hospital, which means that they now have to refer them to the clinic, which means longer waiting times, longer waiting lists, backups, and this is a backward step, in my opinion. It was time enough to send people to the consultants once they had got the readings from the ultrasounds. So, Minister, I say thank you to Senator Burke, and we, of course, will be supporting the bill. And in fairness to him, he's watching out for the general public. He did say, when I spoke to him about this and the bill, that certain practitioners were carrying out things like scanning and things without having adequate cover. So I just wonder how we police this, because if they take out insurance, indemnity insurance, and how do we know that each medical practitioner has adequate cover? You know, how do you police it? That's kind of my question to it. So thank you, Minister, for coming in. And again, Senator Burke, thank you for bringing this bill forward. Margaret.
Well, Margaret, next is Senator Terry Brennan.
Go Margaret, the last car here league agus for while on Fáte Corro at the Oireachtas and Seanad. Minister, the purpose of this bill is to regulate doctors so that they must have appropriate insurance in order to practice medicine in this country. And I believe the vast majority of doctors are very, very responsible and carry appropriate professional indemnity insurance. However, as in all professions, I would say, some may not have an appropriate level of insurance cover, either through inadvertence or by their own choice. This bill will make professional indemnity insurance cover compulsory for all practicing doctors and provide that the Medical Council will have the power to set appropriate levels of insurance to be held by different classes of practitioners. Currently, the Medical Council have no such power, and they only recommend that doctors carry such insurance. The bill will further provide that before the Medical Council can issue a certificate to practice to the practitioner, written evidence of the appropriate insurance being in place must be produced to the Medical Council. The bill also provides for circumstances in which insurance may lapse and makes it an offence to practice without insurance where such insurance is required. At present, someone irresponsible could practice in Ireland without the appropriate professional indemnity insurance. And in the event of negligence or unsatisfactory treatment, an aggrieved or injured patient may have no access to any form of compensation. This bill is intended to apply to doctors who are not domiciled in Ireland, but who practice here often in private clinics, as well as practitioners normally resident in Ireland. In conclusion, Alaska Hillig, I too would wish to acknowledge Senator Burke and the many hours of hard work that he and his commitment in bringing this draft bill before us here today.
Margaret, Senator Ballot.
Margaret Laskahirlik, and like the other speakers, I want to welcome Senator Burke's bill. He's obviously done a lot of work on the bill, and it reads well, and his explanatory memorandum reads well, and of course he brings a wealth of experience to the House, and it's an honour to respond to his bill here today. The State Claims Agency, in its report for 2010, reports that at the end of 2010 they had clinical claims under management with an estimated liability of 786 million. So this is a hugely important area. And one wonders sometimes, Las Cathaoirleach, if the commendable efforts we put into reducing risk and accidents on roads with such success, reducing 650 deaths down to about 160, I think, at the latest count, whether a similar effort isn't required in the health service. Because the level of claims is quite large, as we've seen. It'd be interesting to develop how much would this insurance cost. Would it be a barrier to entry? Would people have difficulty getting the insurance if they had no track record? I think we need to work more on this with difficulties in the public finances, because we have tended to transfer the cost of catastrophes of all kinds to the taxpayer. You know, insurance does exist, and in a hard-pressed exchequer, we should move risk towards insurance rather than to the taxpayer. And one of the suggestions that Mr. Justice Quirk and his committee made in relation to meeting claims is that we look at what he calls periodic payment orders rather than lump sums. Now that may have attractions, as it had attractions in the promissory notes, that we put the payments over the period to which the liability occurs, rather than pay lump sums up front. And I think that's what the country decided to do. Mr. Justice Quirk's committee did recommend the introduction of legislation, and perhaps that should also be considered. The Minister mentions briefly, and in conclusion, Cathaoirleach, and thank you, that he sees difficulties with the new Section C and Sections 2A to 2G. They seem to me to be perfectly normal functions in relation to insurance. I don't see why the Minister presents them as difficulties, especially as he says on page 4 that the Medical Council are doing a very good job in providing an efficient and accountable system for the regulation of the medical profession. Seeing that people are insured doesn't seem to me to raise the obstacles that the Minister mentioned. But I'm sure that will all be resolved in the discussions between Senator Burke and the Minister as they progress the bill. He's certain worries about competition and about displaying the certificate. Would it be in the principal place or in the second place if a medical practitioner has more than one office? I think, you know, we have invented copying machines, and you can put the first one is in the most important place. So, I mean, sometimes the responses to bills seem to be almost designed to raise minor obstacles, as if there were major difficulties, and they're not in this case. And I commend Senator Burke and I commend the Minister for his response, and I look forward to progress on this front. It's very important that we do have properly insured medical practitioners, and I hope that the bill does proceed.
Margaret, Senator David Norris.
Thank you very much, Les Cathaoirleach. I've just come from the Foreign Affairs Committee, so I apologise I wasn't here to hear the Minister or to hear most of my colleagues in what I'm sure were very significant contributions. I think we're very lucky to have somebody like Professor John Crown here, and I look forward to reading his speech subsequently. I think it's very interesting that we have the Minister for Health here. He's a senior cabinet minister, and that shows a degree of respect to Senator Burke, and I'd like to commend him for introducing this bill. It's very timely. It's a very important piece of legislation, and it was appropriate the Minister should be here because in 2009 the Minister actually addressed this matter with legislation in the House. He presented to the Dáil a medical defence bill, which I just see what it was called yet. The Medical Practitioners Professional Indemnity Amendment Bill, which had the principal object of making it a criminal offence in this country for a medical practitioner not to have medical insurance. Now, I understand that this remains the case, that it is not a criminal offence. In fact, it's not an offence of any kind. It's just very unwise. I'd be surprised if there were more than a very small number of doctors, and I apologise again to the House if, while I was at the Foreign Affairs Committee, other people have drawn attention to this, and I'm being repetitive. I don't intend to be. But I think that the approach taken by Senator Burke is, although it does contain penalties for not being registered with an insurance company, I think it is a more benign approach in the bill, and I think it is one that I have no doubt that the medical profession will find reasonable. The difficulty, of course, is the enormous costs of insurance, of all kinds of insurance, but particularly of medical insurance, and the avariciousness that the human animal displays sometimes when they're dealing with doctors. I mean, I know I myself have had a serious infection as a result of a rather badly done treatment. I did not sue the doctor. I don't like suing doctors. I think they actually do their best. And I'm reminded, particularly in America, of the woman whose life was saved by a doctor on board a cruise ship, and he removed an ulcerated appendix, which was about to burst, and from which he probably would have died, with a penknife on the deck at the behest of the captain. And she, having recovered, subsequently sued him for the cosmetic appearance of the scar, which rose above the bikini line, and she received $1 million. I mean, that would put anybody off. You know, if I was a doctor and I saw somebody dying, I'd say, well, go on, just die. You know, it's a terrible thing. And I think we have to recognize this kind of culture. And that leads to a huge increase in cost. And if you look back, in January of this year, there was a settlement between the Medical Defence Union and the government of 45 million, which was part of the indemnification that was involved. But the Medical Defence Union is a British thing. There is a mutual association. It's not actually a commercial insurance company. And in fact, the costs to the government were considerably greater than this. And we have situations now where, tragically, there are circumstances in which very often it's a child is injured, perhaps at childbirth or something like that, and is brain damaged, or there is other damage, and negligence is asserted by the family on behalf of the child, and then enormously expensive treatment is made available so that this child can continue to live. And the life support systems that are necessary are very expensive. No one would decry them, but that is the realistic fact in terms of medical insurance. May I just say one other thing that perhaps Minister McGinley would bring back to his colleague, Minister O'Reilly, and that is the price of medicine in this country. I've just, in the Foreign Affairs Committee, we're dealing with trade issues between Britain and Ireland, and I asked about the impact of our financial situation down here in terms of the rather realistic approach of a lot of people in Northern Ireland, and perhaps that was something that had affected the recent poll. The first thing he said was the medical services here, that you have a kind of a free at delivery end, or whatever it is, to the patient up in the north, and apparently the services are considerably better and perhaps cheaper, and our dentistry is. And the other thing is, there's an article here in the Irish Times, is there a reasonably priced doctor in the house? Now, I'm aware that I'm standing next to a seated doctor, so at least I'm in a position to run away if I antagonize them very much. And I know that there are very good doctors who are very reasonable and charitable and sometimes don't charge in poor case and all that. But there's a couple of cases here of a woman in very average circumstance who had very little money. She went to get a repeat prescription, and he charged her 50 quid. What, the secretary, she didn't even see the doctor. She wanted to collect a repeat prescription from the receptionist, and the receptionist refused to give it to her until she coughed up 50 quid. And another one's 60 quid for the same thing. Now, I think, Minister, it would be good if you take that back to Minister O'Reilly and say that practice shouldn't be tolerated. But I would like to say that Senator Burke has done the House and the Oireachtas a service, and I think it's been recognised by the quality of the debate, by the attendance of the senior minister involved, and I think it's a good day for Seanad Éireann. I note, finally, that the Minister has said that he has great sympathy and that Senator Burke has done an enormous amount of work. We consulted very widely. I don't know if he consulted with his party colleague, Minister O'Reilly, but the Minister has taken the usual position of saying, well, it's an excellent work, very good bill and all the rest of it, but it has a few deficiencies and we're going to put it through. I would have said that it would be much better, in fact, having studied this legislation, having attempted to introduce legislation of this nature unsuccessfully in the other House, it would have been a lot better if Minister O'Reilly had taken the time and the trouble with his officials to amend the bill, because the degree of variation between the Minister's position and Senator Burke's position is not sufficiently large to sink the bill, in my opinion. And we have had bills in this House where there have been over 200 government amendments presented at the same time as legislation. So it wouldn't have killed them to lose their dog-in-the-manger attitude in government and put Senator Burke's excellent bill through with whatever amendments the government chose, and show a little bit of deference and respect to this august chamber of Seanad.
Thank you, sir. Senator Cullinane.
Lasco Hurley.
You missed your slot, but I think I'll let you back in, sir.
Thank you. I first of all want to thank Senator Burke for tabling this bill before us today, and for the work that he has put into research in this area as well. And I want to join with other senators who have acknowledged the huge contribution that Senator Burke has made, not just on this bill, but on many areas in relation to healthcare. And I do genuinely see him as one of the outstanding senators that we have in this chamber. And I've said so publicly and privately on a number of occasions. So I think it is incumbent on us, when we do see people putting in effort and taking the time to do these important things, that's recognised. It's also important as well to say that, and Senator Norris mentioned this, that the Minister himself in a previous incarnation as the opposition health spokesperson tabled a very similar bill. And I think it would have been better maybe if the Minister had worked more closely with the Senator to ensure that the bill was progressed through this House and it all much more quickly. But having said that, I would hope that the Minister will at least allow the bill to go through committee stage, and that any issues which need to be teased out and ironed out can be dealt with. Because while there may be some flaws with it, essentially the logic of the bill is quite straightforward. And the reason why many people have raised all sorts of other issues outside what the bill is actually about, including the Minister, is because the bill itself is very straightforward. And it's a piece of legislation to ensure that all medical professionals are compelled to hold professional indemnity cover, that be on a statutory basis, in the same way that solicitors and many other different professions have. And that's the simple logic or intent of the bill. And I would hope that the Minister will allow the bill to progress. And we can't be across every issue, and I would be the first to concede that I was not aware of the fact that this was the case, that doctors and medical professionals did not have to have insurance cover. So I was quite surprised, and I'm sure that many people outside this chamber, many members of the public, would be equally as surprised that that's the case as well. And I would also, and I wasn't present for Senator Burke's opening remarks, but I would also like to, on my own behalf, say that the vast majority of medical professionals in this state do have insurance cover, and that should be stated. So we are dealing here with very small numbers of people, in my view, who would take a chance, but nonetheless, they are out there. It's happened. And I don't think it's the right thing to do. I think in an area as important as this, in terms of providing healthcare, that the people who provide the care should have the appropriate insurance. And the Minister mentioned some professionals who had some level of insurance for some medical care, but were practicing something else. And he gave the example, I think, of cosmetics. So I think it's important that it isn't just that they have to have the insurance, but they have the appropriate assurance to the medical treatment or care that they are providing as well. So I'm not going to say any more, because I think it's all of the arguments have been made, only to again commend the Senator for tabling the bill, appeal to the Minister to ensure that it progresses through this House and the lower House as quickly as possible. And again, to say that this, as Senator Norris said, it is a good day for the Seanad, where senators do bring forward bills, and it isn't just motions, which can often be the case, that we're putting forward a piece of legislation which we in this House have an opportunity to do, and using the House to bring forward legislation on important issues. And the Minister made the point that there are many, many important issues which the government are dealing with and tackling with, and that's why there's a huge legislative backup. But these issues are also important, and we can use the Seanad, and the government representatives especially can use the Seanad to bring forward legislation as well to help, I suppose, in the overall delivery of important pieces of legislation. So for that reason as well, I would like to commend Senator Burke and to say that my party will be fully supporting the bill.
Senator Koch-Keane.
Thank you very much. Well, I want to support the bill, and I suppose it's difficult speaking now when I know that I think the Minister has said that he wasn't accepting it. I wasn't actually here, couldn't make it. I'm sorry for the Minister's speech, but I was absolutely surprised that it wasn't being accepted, because when I see in 2009, when in opposition, the current Minister for Health, James Riley, published his own bill, Medical Practitioners Professional Indemnity Amendment Bill, and I am quite confident that Senator Burke examined that bill nearly with a fine-tooth comb to see how well can I marry this bill with that bill of 2009, and for the purpose of introducing a requirement for professional indemnity cover for medical practitioners. So the aim is the same. Just is it because it's being introduced in the Senate that it is not being accepted? As Senator Norris said, there is a mode of operandi there where 200 amendments have been accepted in the Senate to a bill. So I wouldn't think like that, you know, for 3 pages or 4 pages in a bill, there couldn't be that many amendments that are that bit different. I wonder, is it too late, Minister here, Acting Minister in the chair, to say, could we look at that 2009 bill and can we see what is the same and what is so much different that it would be possible at this stage? You know, is there any comeback on it? Because if the intention was there in 2009 and it's going here, I think this is an ideal opportunity to use the chamber. Maybe the other legislative house is so busy or whatever. It is an important bill. It is important, as one of the other senators said there, most doctors have cover, but you only need one not to have, or not to have the level of cover required is another thing. How many doctors actually have the level of cover required? Is it minimum? And, you know, so all of those questions I think have to be answered. I'd like to support the bill, but I am disappointed that we can't advance it further. Hopefully, I don't know, is there any comeback on it? I don't know. Thank you.
Thank you.
I was very much in agreement with the tributes indeed to Senator Burke. He's extremely thoughtful and has great attention to detail, and I want to add my voice in complimenting him on the work that he has done here in bringing forward this bill, and it's typical of his approach as a very fine parliamentarian. And I do think that if there are 2 kinds of narrowness or narrow-mindedness that beset politics around here. One is the kind of party political narrow-mindedness where people immediately resort to defending their side and castigating the other, and we saw that this very day in debate. But the second is the narrow-mindedness of government towards the legislature, which is that there's a real resistance to the notion that the legislature might ever beat government to the punch in bringing forward sensible legislation. And it would be as easy for us to say that the Minister should join in and seek to improve Senator Burke's bill as it is for him to propose to take Senator Burke's bill into account going forward. So in any event, I was also struck by what Senator Norris had to say, a very interesting speech. And it reminded me of a recent story of my own that I came across. A friend of mine who needed to have some liver tests or some cholesterol test done. In any event, he advised the doctor and made his appointment the day before. So he turned up and he was informed then, after getting various other things looked after, that he couldn't have his bloods done because he wasn't fasting. So he had to come back another day. He was charged the second time. And then, of course, when he came back to have his results explained to him, he was charged the third time. And the word that occurred to his mind at that point was ching. So it's nothing at all to do with the issue of indemnity, but there are many issues of good practice, or it's definitely one of those areas where we have a long way to go. To borrow the words of my distinguished colleague Senator Quinn, in crowning the customer, there's a journey to be gone there yet. This is a sensible piece of legislation, and it's another clear piece of law which would aim to improve the lives of citizens, and it's legislation that would clear up what is a very apparent loophole. I think the insurance would be in the interest of doctors and the customer, the patient. It's interesting to note that in Austria, Germany, Latvia, France and Slovakia, it's mandatory for doctors to have insurance. In the Czech Republic, Finland, Hungary, Poland and Spain, there's a requirement for healthcare institutions and individual doctors to be insured. In Lithuania and Portugal, there's a requirement for institutions to be insured, and it's advised that doctors be insured. In Italy and Estonia, insurance is voluntary. In Denmark and the Netherlands, there's a state indemnity scheme. Sweden also has a state indemnity scheme, but there's an additional requirement that doctors practicing in the private sector are insured either personally or through the service companies in which they work. Discretionary indemnity is allowed in the UK, Ireland and Malta. Therefore, in our system, we don't have this guarantee of cover. I'm not saying anything that anybody here doesn't know at this point. I'd like to ask whether we can do more to inform the customer, the patient, of ways to get redress if they feel they have been harmed or mistreated. How do we give them this knowledge, given that so many people are now travelling abroad for medical procedures? They need to be informed of the different systems in the EU states and the extent of the insurance provided. So it would be worthwhile to see if we can raise this issue on the EU level during our presidency of the EU, I think. This issue of cross-border healthcare is, I think, a very important one. Finally, I would say that the deterrent effect of the legislation would be great, but I would be concerned that the cost of cover might be passed to consumers through doctors' fees and charges. How do we protect against this, or indeed can we? I'd be interested to get some information about that from the Minister, or perhaps indeed from Senator Burke in due course. So I feel I need to say commiserations to Senator Burke that his very fine bill isn't being run with. Certainly if he chooses to put the matter to a vote today, he'll have my support. But hopefully the Government will, at the very least, not delay in bringing forward the necessary legislation. Thank you very much.
Senator Morris Cummins.
Thank you, Cathaoirleach. I'd like to join in the compliments to my colleague, Senator Burke, for introducing this bill to the House. I know full well the amount of time and effort that he's put into this bill. The Minister and indeed the Department have been talking about introducing such a bill for a number of years. And yet when a member of the House introduces legislation, be it flawed in some ways or not, if the Department think it's flawed, I would have thought that the bill could have been amended at committee stage, and I must say I'm disappointed that it hasn't been accepted. I question why the Department are dragging their heels on this legislation, because that's what's happening. This is going on for the last 3, 4, 5 years, people talking about indemnity for medical practitioners. And I must express my disappointment at the Department in their dragging their heels in dealing with this matter. Now, the Minister has stated that he will take on board quite a number of sections in Senator Burke's bill when the Government and when the Department introduce that bill. And the question that I would be asking is, when are we likely to see that piece of legislation? Because if it goes on the same as it has for the last number of years, we won't see it before the term of government is up. And it's for that reason I compliment, as I said, Senator Burke. I know the consultation that he's had with many people on this bill and on the drafting of this bill. And again, I must express my disappointment that it's not been accepted and that it could be amended at committee stage. But again, I welcome the fact that many parts of it will be introduced in the government bill, but I would question when that bill is to come before this House or indeed the other House. Thank you, Pierre.
Margaret. Senator Burke, you have 4 or 5 minutes to respond.
Much, Las Cathaoirleach, and could I thank all my colleagues who made a contribution on this debate. Could I just cover 1 or 2 items referred to? First of all, I must say
I'm actually stunned, and that's putting it bluntly. I was told an hour ago that the department were accepting this bill and intended putting amendments to it. I must say I'm absolutely stunned. And it's not that I didn't give the documentation to the department. I gave it to them over 8 weeks ago. I did not get a response, and I'm totally astonished that this is the approach of the department at this stage, and it's certainly a huge surprise to me. Could I just touch on one or two issues referred to? One is in